We've been doing a lot of reading around, just the honesty of not only what we earn, what we spend, but also what we owe. And this is something we're bringing into more of our conversations with our clients. But the purpose here is not to run home and make everyone to do a budget right away. It's just continue to bring awareness to what you are spending. The reality is, as we observe, families that we meet with for the first time, really 8 out of 10 of them do not even know how much they're spending on a monthly or annual basis.
I'd say it's hard, right? One of the hardest things about knowing what you spend is keeping track of it all today. And if you think about most people's situations, I can at least speak personally, it's multiple credit cards, it's a few different checking accounts, there's different logins, it's usually not all under one spouse, multiple spouse. So how do you aggregate all of that data, and how do you take the time to really go on the treasure hunt to know what you're spending?
Yeah, super difficult right now. The velocity of money is huge. And that's where, when we talk about where we help, is simplification, right? But before we get into that, what else is there?
Another term that I like is psychological distance, where you think about how we pay bills today versus maybe how our parents paid bills or those before us, where you're either going and handing cash and you're seeing that money physically leave your wallet, or you're writing out a check and balancing your checkbook, and you're forced to reconcile every 30 days or so exactly what you spent and where. Nowadays, it's on a credit card. It's an automatic renewal through your Amazon Prime account that links to HBO, and you have no idea that you're losing $15.99 a month to watch Ballers.
Right. Like, it could be anything. But the reality is, too, like, to that point, it's like, when's the last time we balanced a checkbook, right?
Personally, never.
Right. I've moved away from that just based on, the velocity of money, and it becomes difficult to do. What do you think about being embarrassed?
I think there is a lot of embarrassment with money, and I think it's on both ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
You can see people embarrassed if they're not keeping up with the Joneses, if they're not spending enough to have a nice house or car to give off a certain illusion. And then you can also see people on the other side who think or know that they're probably spending too much, and they're embarrassed of not keeping track of that, not being accountable. And it's easy to sort of create that distance or avoidance behavior if you're worried about spending too much, right?
Yeah.
So we see both sides of it.
Well, what happens if I have more money than I'll ever spend, and it doesn't matter?
Yeah,
Right.
well, then you're going to likely find a different reason, right? And that could be just so much for knowing if you don't have enough, or if you have so much money, you can never spend it all. Why should you care about spending? It's not going to impact your financial plan, but it's going to impact other things like trust or transparency. And you're likely going to want to know if you're getting ripped off or not.
Yeah.
Regardless of if you're going to run out of money, you want to know that the people that you're dealing with are doing business the right way, that you've grown accustomed to, likely to accumulate that wealth in the first place.
Yeah, we see it all the time when we review not only the fees on the account or other relationships they might have in place from legal standpoint or accounting standpoint. A lot of opportunities that we would just say improve efficiencies, right? And that's important. And it's a good transition into the why. The reality is, that money you might be saving elsewhere, you can be doing other things with, or potentially even giving to more charities, or leave a larger legacy. Because that compounding effect is huge over that time frame, and it's super important to identify there.
And that's going to depend on where you're at in your wealth accumulation journey. So hypothetically, if you're the individual who has more money than they know what to do with, and they'll never spend it all, or even just a retiree who's financially independent, you're going to care for different reasons than somebody who is in the accumulation phase. Your likely reason of why should you care is to make sure that you're getting the most life out of your wealth, where you've spent the majority of your life and career accumulating the wealth. It's about life enjoyment and life fulfillment.
One of our roles that we work with clients on is making sure that they are kind of balancing the act between not leaving too much on the table, but living a fulfilled life today. And that's a big one, because a lot of times we'll see that someone gets into their late 70s or 80s, and you hear, I wish I would have.
And what if I'm someone who is in maybe younger in my career, accumulating and working towards financial independence, then spending almost takes on either that guilt or that distance vibe. What's something that I should be worrying about if I'm building or working up towards financial independence?
Yeah, another reason to identify what your lifestyle costs today. like just that understanding of that lifestyle can help you not only, again, validate, the path you're on, not only what you're spending, but also hopefully saving along the way. That's going to be sustainable. But if not, we identify many times that, it's not sustainable. And that's the opportunity to make changes sooner than later, to start saving more or making smaller adjustments that have significant impact over time. Because we'll say that just the psychology of spending and money, no one likes to go backwards. So really identifying that, and if they don't have to make a change, awesome. But it's easier to make a change earlier on than we get into your later, call it 50s or 60s or even 70s at that point.
Right. And then that's where we'll like to use some good benchmarks and really validating that you're paying yourself first or saving adequately, right? And
Exactly.
Depending on the individual situation, we'll usually say, or a good benchmark is, are you saving at least 20% of your income? Now, that's going to vary and differ based on your situation, but at least setting an initial hurdle rate of what should you be doing for yourself first, and then all of a sudden your spending after that should have less guilt attached to it, depending on what value or what experiences you're purchasing. My wife and I went through our finances this last weekend, not only for the video shoot, but also as we got married this year, and the credit card was running a little bit hot. So much to our suspicion, we'd spent a little more than we thought this year, which was okay, because as we actually uncovered all the spending, we noticed one of the top categories was travel, saving for our honeymoon, and the actual event of throwing the wedding and gathering all our friends, families, loved ones, from across, as many different states as we could count. So we went into the conversation thinking guilty, we've spent more than we should have this year. We should feel bad, we were afraid, we didn't, we wanted to wait until the wedding was over to finally look at the balance sheet. But after doing the exercise, we actually walked away from it, you could say relieved, or at least validated that we were putting our dollars where we wanted to. Right. We're saving, we're paying ourselves first, we're doing all those right things. I was nervous, felt a little guilty, but then on the back side of it, that clarity and transparency and really aligning your spending to your goals helped us a lot, for sure.
Yeah, and like that, you already said, you're like a little fearful going into it, right? But afterwards, it wasn't so bad, and even if it came out worse than you expected, you have clarity. And that is number one.
Where does the rubber meet the road, and how can, what are best practices that we see or ways that we work with clients to help track it better?
Yeah, we mentioned earlier on simplicity. Yep. Is narrowing it down to a handful of accounts that allows you to track that. And the nice thing is a lot of credit cards now will do that on your behalf. But if you have 3 or 4 credit cards, it's definitely hard to integrate and aggregate there. There's a lot of great tools that will help start to bring this all together, though, too. I would say none of them are perfect from what we found out there. Our eMoney software, our financial planning software, has a nice aggregation tool, which is a great starting point. We help clients, comb through that. But the easiest way to do that is start to look at not only your bank accounts, how those been trending over the last, call it 6 to 12 months, but then also bringing those standard expenses, taxes, insurance, maybe your mortgage, and then add that to your credit card balances to get a sense of that. So you can do it pretty easily on the back of the envelope, but even that, the key thing is simplification.
And is spending always, if you start the year and project that you're going to spend $150,000, do we find that spending is always right on where you project? And how should you really think about that, right? Yeah. Should you feel guilty if you go $4,000 over your budget?
Yeah, absolutely not. You should not. We get clients asking us all the time, where should I be based on the wealth I have? And that's not the conversation. It's where do you want to be? Yep. Because that's where you're never going to hit it spot on. It's really an average, and it's making sure that it's at least in the ballpark, or what we call within the guardrails that we help you build to sustain that wealth based on the objectives that you laid out.
I like that. Another thing, as you talk about the psychology of money, and Morgan Housel talks about it, sort of that internal versus external benchmark. Like you said, where should I be based on my wealth? It's you defining that for you, not your neighbors defining it for you, your area code, your neighbor's cars in their garage, etc.
Yeah, and that's all defined a lot of times by your upbringing, right? That could be almost like we see called revenge spending sometimes, where something that you were held back from as a child or told you couldn't have. We see a lot of times habits lead into maybe buying that fancy car or that big ticket item, or a bigger home than you might need relative to that. But on the other side, we see, as we think about product of upbringing, we see a lot of folks, how their parents handled money. that's super important to just be aware of, to observe, to make sure that the money mindset is exposed so you can better manage that piece of your financial life.
So Neil, if I'm interested in learning more about my spending, or anything from today's video resonates, really, what should I do next, and what can I take away?
Yeah, certainly if for our current clients, this is a topic that we believe in, at least reviewing at least on an annual basis. So we have our year-end review meetings coming up here, and this will be part of the conversation. Kind of doing that annual audit to make sure that you're within the guardrails or the framework of the spending that we talked about. So make sure we check that box and be that accountability partner there. But if not, and you have questions around this topic, then those are things that we have the tools and resources to help out with. Conversations, but also kind of learning more about that money mindset and extracting some of those spending habits is also important and part of that dialogue. So if you have questions, reach out to us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.